Hi, my name is Lee Gerdes. I'm CEO of BrainState Technologies. I'm here to talk today about mental health in college students, or more appropriately put really, is how students can get their potential, particularly those who are entering and in college. My background is in math and physics and data patterning and really in clinical psych and theology. I wrote a book called Limitless You, The Infinite Possibilities of a Balanced Brain. And I am CEO of the company that licenses and develops neurotechnology. We have about 200 plus licenses in about 20 countries around the world with 60,000 plus clients. And our corporate office is in Scottsdale, Arizona, where today it's close to 80. Sorry, I had to say that and rub it in a little bit, but you can respond with any kind of messages or questions you want to give me along the way. They don't have to be questions, they can also be comments. And especially on today's topic, I want you to feel free to make those comments, because I'm going to do something that's kind of, I'm going to advocate something that may be new. It also may be upsetting depending on what field you're in. When we talk first and foremost about mental health, we're not talking, the purpose of this seminar wasn't to talk about psychiatric conditions. The purpose was to talk about healthful conditions which mentally, students could carry. So our, some of the questions that you may have are questions that involve my credential in talking about mental health in general. And I've been questioned about that credential before. Actually, Dr. Lee works as a director of research. Is much more akin to that as a medical doctor who did his internship in a psychiatric institution. However, neither of us believe, and both of us know, that mental health is really predominantly a matter of health for each and every one of us. And the mental part has to do with the neurology, or the part of ourselves which we call our brain, that is the driver for everything. And so I will take mental health issues or questions if you like. I'm not a doctor, I won't be able to answer them. We are not somebody that treats, diagnoses, cures, or in any way, shape, or form offers medical services or psychological services to our clients. However, we do offer services to our clients to help them recognize that, as Michelangelo did in the painting on the Sistine Chapel, that the brain is the central part of their being. In this case, Michelangelo's painting of the creation account, you'll see God here encased in a brain. This is the frontal lobe, this is the frontal pole, this is the temporal lobe, this is the brain stem, so forth. Beautiful. I got excited about that. It's not yesterday's news, it's really old news, and some people have got it for a long time. The brain drives. And when the brain drives, the brain registers what happens during its driving succession over the years. In this case, notice that for a tree, drought markers or trauma times, patterns in the tree's history, are recorded with rings which are closer together. And drought markers or trauma times for a brain, I believe, also record patterns of that trauma for a brain and as it goes forward. Now, we understand the world really based on a couple of who we think are absolute geniuses. Sterling being the first, who came up with the whole understanding of allostasis versus homeostasis. The understanding that as stressors come upon a person, then that brain has to deal with those stressors. And the more it deals with, pretty soon, as it gets too much and it breaks down into some kind of a pathology or dis-ease state. Now, in looking at allostasis from that regard, I think it was Sterling who went out first among houses taking a survey among low socioeconomic folk, and in doing so found that there were a lot of those people that came to the door with different kinds of aphasia, different kinds of problems in limbs, obviously from strokes. And Sterling thought, wow, my upper middle class neighborhood, nobody came to the door like that almost. This must be something unique. And then he started stressing mice in a laboratory to find out when they overloaded with stress what happened to them. And sure enough, what happened to them was oftentimes a stroke or other disease states or breakdowns in the pattern. Because if the central processing, if the driving processing unit of the whole gets too much stress, then it has to unload that and break down somewhere to take the whole down to a different level. And then Stephen Porges, another genius I feel in the field, came up with the whole understanding of how this stress and trauma worked. Now, I believe these people are really geniuses, and I think we stand on their shoulders because, in fact, what we've seen observationally with clients over the last 14 years, what we've seen observationally, they theoretically have come up with, but in looking at what they've, and therefore I think they're truly genius, what we are is just good observational scientists who have formulated this understanding. But when we look at the polyvagal ladder, for example, notice that here at the top of it is calming, and then that's represented by high heart rate variability. It's represented by digestive efficiency and respiratory efficiency. Now, one doesn't always equate the digestion and respiratory and heart rate are necessarily, well, heart rate more, but certainly not digestion and respiratory, not so much usually, having to do with a calming state, but in fact they are. So then, as stress or trauma increases, the sympathetic adrenal arousal happens, and you have release of stress hormones, and then cardiovascular arousal, higher blood pressure. You have inhibition of digestive processes, and you have inhibition of some kind of respiratory processes. And lastly, you have, after that breaks down totally, you have an emotional numbing, wherein the system moves to the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic side. You have emotional numbing. You have stress-associated heart issues, and those heart issues can be all kinds of things. In this case, bradycardia, and bradycardia rhythms are most likely. You have a stress-associated gastronomical dysfunction, and finally, kind of neurogenic bronchial restriction and inability to breathe. And then as you relieve stress here, these things reduce. And so these two geniuses of actually the modern day, modern being, I think after 80, Sterling may have started before that. He did start before that. But still, modern day, these two geniuses of the modern day are those people who we stand on, their shoulders we stand on, and their understanding of the world we stand on, and we can make sense out of what we have observationally have seen. So let me show you today a little bit what we have observationally seen. We use sensors, we design them, we build them, they are ours. No one else in the world uses them. These sensors are connected to the scalp. These scalp sensors pick up electromagnetic well, they call it electromagnetic energy, but in fact it's probably more like sound energy. But nevertheless, these sensors pick up electromagnetic energy, as is most science understanding today, and then we use it in different parts of the brain, and we do that so we can see how one side of the brain is functioning compared to the other. We do that so we can see how high energy is compared to low energy. We call proportionation. And we do that so we can see how one side of the brain is firing compared to the other, and we call that that whole thing congruence, when the two fire well and are relatively symmetrical. So then in our brainwave optimization process, here's what we do. So you know, when I'm showing you these diagrams from these students I'm going to show you in a minute, we take an assessment, we find out where those differences are. The computer then tells us where, for this individual client, where we need to place the sensors and what protocol is likely best to run. We place the sensors for that client and we read those brain patterns. I said read. That's all these sensors do. Yes, they have a computer chip in them, but the only thing the sensor does is non-invasive reading of the actual signal of the brain. We break that signal down in a computer. We do it very fast. We do it actually down to 4 milliseconds, but almost always in 8 milliseconds. Then we map in a middle of the range of frequencies. We map that middle range by dominant frequency, which exact frequency, or which half a frequency, even to the 0.05, even sometimes frequency, which frequency is dominant. And then we see, based on that frequency, we map that to a musical note or a sound note. Now we have designed and engineered most of those notes so they don't have a they don't have a beginning and a continuance and then a drop off. They have instead mostly the pure sound or pure note itself. However, we don't play the note back to the person. The brain chooses the note and is played back to the person. So the brain is actually playing the music back to itself. And then we believe that it's a resonance loop that happens. Happening in that resonance loop, the middle of the brain gets stronger, and probably not unlike meditation at all, once you practice meditation, sometimes for decades, mind you. But when you're practiced in meditation, the brain relaxes and is able to reset. And this is brainwave optimization, and this is human optimization. It's for health, it's for psychology or psyche, it is for theology or for our understanding and study of God. It is for our spirituality, our connectedness to that which is beyond ourselves and to each other. And that is all in this central processing unit called the brain, and that's what we have the privilege of helping to relax. It is a beautiful thing, but it is brain mirroring effectively. So we pick up the signal from the brain and we send that signal, we see the signal in the computer in the middle range, we send it back to the brain, and the brain itself resets itself. So what happens when we do that? And we see that a balanced brain may not have any of these things. It may not have very anger issues or digestive or addictive dependencies or stress or poor memory or brain injury or the lack of symptoms resulting from brain injury or sadness or ability to focus or a lot of other things. Why? Because the brain, in fact and indeed, is the central driver of all of our physicality, of all of our psyche, of all of our understanding and spirituality. It is an incredible, incredible thing. And there are two sides of it that we generally look at. We formulated this idea many years ago after observing our own clients and how they came to us. Some came to us rather frozen and unable to easily talk with us, and At the same time, there were times when those clients had even difficulty feeling, physically even, but they certainly had difficulty feeling emotionally. And we worked with those clients, and we categorized those clients of having a left dominant temporal lobe. We saw and we worked with other clients who seemed to be overactivated, sometimes quick to defend themselves, too quick to anger. They told us about sometimes night sweats or the inability to sit still, and many other various things, and we categorize those as sympathetic. So in our curse kind of non-medical model, we saw the parasympathetic and the sympathetic come to us, moving that into categories, and later then used polyvagal theory and other theories and understood it as the autonomic nervous system. Since our understanding, however, Wake Forest University School of Medicine has done clinical trials, and from those clinical trials has proven that that understanding is precisely correct. That the left side of the brain drives the parasympathetic and the right side of the brain drives the sympathetic system. In the left side of the brain, the parasympathetic, what happens there is that this heartbeat's slowed, the bronchia are constricted, there's a simultaneous secretions often and release of bile, and the bladder contracts. On the right side, pupils dilate, you know, you have it inhibits the flow of saliva, usually heart rate increases, and so on. These kinds of things, and this side, sympathetic side, inhibits bladder contraction. So you're looking at these two sides of the brain driving everything internally, all of our nervous system internally for our nervous organs in our physicality. So what we see then, when one side of that brain, parasympathetic on the left, sympathetic on the right, when one side or the other is dominant, we see these kinds of symptoms: depression, weight gain, dizziness, low blood flow, heart rate, fatigue, diarrhea, decreased clarity of thought, and dissociation. On the right side, hypertension, anxiety, panic attacks, hypervigilance, poor sleep, and emotional aggression. So, and probably hypervigilance is a big one there, especially for soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. They're very aware of what's around them and, you know, what could be dangerous. Much more aware than we are in living here without going to war, without being a soldier. We haven't had cars blow up by us. We haven't had children run up to us and explode. Many things that they experience. Most of us in this population have never had experience or never don't want to have experience with, and we thank God there are men and women who serve us and keep us safe that can and would do that. Okay, now let me show you one of these students who came to us recently. A client upon arrival reported that they had just completed first semester at college and was struggling academically. They attributed that to anxiety, lack of self-confidence, and impaired attention focus. She additionally struggled with negative affect, or as her mother says, being doomsdayish, which is a good way to put it, by the way, and I'll explain that later. But see here how it's a little bit difficult to see, but what we see here is that this is a right side dominant brain that we're looking at, and the proportionation for very low frequencies versus high frequencies is very poor. She has much more very low frequencies. So this is in the frontal lobes, and they are very overactive low frequencies, and they are very underactive in high frequencies. And when I talked about the doomsday-ish, our brains are made such that the left side of this brain, let me go back here, the left side of this brain has neurons very close together. The right side of our brain has neurons further apart. So when we wish to think on the left side, we do such things as step-by-step planning and maneuvering. And also we do language from the left side of our brain. When we wish to think contextually or in a larger context, we think of that on most likely on the right side of our brain. That's where it dominates. And so we look at colors, we look at different styles for sure, and we think about that from the right side of our brain where it dominates. However, please remember that both sides of our brain do both things all the time. So it is important that these two sides can communicate with each other down this middle called the corpus callosum, and they communicate with each other, we believe, functionally, and it is important that the left, the right, and the middle be very closely symmetrical, or very close together, very equal, almost equal, much of the time. Some of the time we don't want to see it together. It depends on the load. And certainly with eyes open, which we saw with this form here, we wanted to see this left side, this left frontal lobe, drive more, but the right frontal lobe was driving. So with the right frontal lobe driving, there is a contextual problem. What that problem usually is that it's something like, oh no, this always happens to me. Well, nothing always happens to me. The fact is, I'm making that up. Why am I making it up? Because my brain is driving me to that conclusion, but it's not true. And so my brain is driving it that conclusion to my consciousness, because even though it's not true, because my brain is imbalanced. The right front is driving more than the left when eyes open at task, and therefore the person is known as doomsday or all or nothing thinking. Generally speaking, when you think that, you can pretty well bet that it's not true. And then, after her final session, notice that left side and right side are much more equal, and notice that the left side is slightly dominant now. And notice, most importantly, that the low frequencies here have quieted enormously, and the energy is she's able to function much differently. So her mother says she's now a girl on a mission, etc. And that's I'll get into more of what her mom said, but here is what's really telltale. When you look at some technologies, particularly when you look at them to do attention deficit disorder or something, oftentimes you'll look at those technologies and they will be deemed in the biofeedback or neurofeedback category. Those technologies will, I don't know any myself, that look at 0 to 1 in terms of hertz. But here is what you see, a close-up view of 1 hertz bands from 0 to 3. And you'll see how tremendously active these are, both on the left and the right, here during her assessment when she began. And then you'll see them here, how calmed and smooth they are afterwards. So if you can't even see this range, how in the world can you work with it? You can't. And so that's why when brainwave optimization is viewing patterns like this to see disproportionation, and then working there to get that energy more towards the center. That's why the brain can reset itself. However, when we work there, we don't train the brain to do anything. Instead, we try to get the brain to relax, because when it relaxes, then it can reset itself. If you get too excited and you're talking too fast, sometimes you have to just stop a second, take a breath, and then you can talk normally. And that's the same basic thing. Meditation can do that for a person too. I totally believe that, except that you have to be very practiced at it, and being practiced at it sometimes requires you to do it daily for hours at a time, daily, for decades, in order to be really good at it. Now, what was her mother's perspective? This client, she said, is now a girl on a mission. She has the ability to cope with stress and anxiety going back to school. Now, remember when I talked about the polyvagal theory and the ladder, how as stress increases you get different breakdowns in process? Well, in this case, she's able to deal with stress much better. So it is as if her middle range has expanded to kind of swallow up kind of a, you can call it what you will, but I think of it as potential energy, so that she can deal with things as they come and go much more readily. So it just warmed my heart to read this. She is pushing boundaries and doing things under her own initiative. She would never have done this on her own, she says, in the past, because her anxiety would have taken over. And if you don't know what that feels like, you should. You know, I've been harassed by someone for a long time, and then when I really dig into that harassment and that person, I have to feel sorry for them, because, you know, I see that they're just, you know, pathetic. And I wonder, what in the world was I worried about? So, I mean, you know what sometimes anxiety is and where it can lead you and how it can rob you of not only your senses but your confidence. Again, from a mother's perspective, she's processing things as they come without a negative attitude, right? Left side dominant in the front, eyes open at task, are pretty close to being equal. Slightly dominant at times, I guess, but they're close to being equal. So, and she's able to talk with her mom about everything. If your mom, I don't know if that's good or bad. You'll have to make that decision. Don't make me make that decision for you. But at least she was. And she says, in the past, her daughter was, as I said, very doomsdayish, and now she responds with, it's going. And I feel blessed to work with this technology and help people like this, because that's first and foremost, that's our mission. But secondly, I get to see it. I get to see it happen. And it doesn't take months. It doesn't take years. It takes instead hours and days. Now, we don't ever know how many hours and days, but let me give you another example. Here's another example of somebody that spent 10 sessions in 5 days, and this boy was very bright, and he was well established in school. He had good grades, and his mother said that, but his mind had a tendency to constantly race, so he couldn't relax. And he admitted using marijuana to quiet his mind, but he's not used it since doing brainwave optimization, and is now stated that he doesn't feel he needs it. So that's cool. Another example, this child went from reading at the 1st grade level to the 8th grade level in a year. However, the child did 30 sessions and will likely do more, but was reading at the 8th grade level and kept keeping up with his 8th grade peers when he was able to go back to school recently. And when his mom asked him what he would like to say to those people who helped him with brainwave optimization, those people who actually produced and offered brainwave optimization in the world, he said, "I love you." And that's it. That's what we work for. Sure, there's money involved. That's only the food to provide the fuel, to provide the food, the means to provide the food to keep us going. But the truth is, that's what we work for. We work for that kind of sense of satisfaction, knowing that our life and our work is really doing something that matters on this planet, and we're going to do a lot more. Okay, Wake Forest University School of Medicine, working the last 4 years to do clinical trials. They've done insomnia, migraines, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, POTS, postural tachycardia syndrome, hot flashes, and then changes in the autonomic nervous system. So I think the research funding since 2011 is closer to probably $3 million at this point. There's published paper on the methods that we use called brainwave optimization, or HIRAM. Brainwave optimization is the public or common name, and HIRAM is the high resolution relational. As you see here, it's non-invasive. It's an allostatic methodology, and so HIRAM is the name we use scientifically. And you see another clinical paper, peer-reviewed journal article published. This is a medical school peer-reviewed journal article, by the way. It's not a lesser kind of peer review, so it's not as if I had my colleagues review it in a small school and then publish a journal and call that a peer-reviewed journal article. This is a little more than that. It's a lot more than that, and it's in Brain and Behavior magazine, and it's the one that's published so far is the one published on insomnia. So, as I said previously, this doesn't involve any transmission of energy. Those sensors read, they're read-only. It's not intended to affect the brain directly. Rather it's intended to allow the brain a comfortable place and a means to optimize and balance itself. It is in no way, shape, or form meant to diagnose, treat, heal, or cure, and is not a medical device. Brainwave optimization does not involve education to change brainwaves via conscious learning. The generally accepted definition of neurofeedback for the last 10 or 15 years, if you can find one, but the general accepted one, 99% of them all agree that neurofeedback is a way to capture feedback from the brain via EEG and then have the client instructed to change that brain pattern to allow the brain usually to go to some designated range. Neurofeedback is based on 7 ranges. Brainwave optimization is based on 48,000. Each cycle from measurement to action is faster than any other wellness modality in brainwave optimization, and it's very helpful to have and to help that central processing unit of our being, the brain, reset itself. So it's a good thing, and we hope that if you have a college student that you'll consider it in terms of their well-being. Improved focus, better sleep, and positive social interaction. We can all use that, probably, but the fact is, if you remember, if you have been out of school for quite some time, especially when you were in school, these things were extremely important. And understand too that we're putting a lot of pressure on our students now that we didn't before. So I think that the pressure alone is something using brainwave optimization that can be mitigated, by the brain itself, when it finds it can relax, reset itself, and have new ways to operate to offset the stress that it has. Please, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send those in. Your brain defines an infinite you, a place which your ageless well-being emanates. And that's you. It's inside of you. It's inside of your college student. And what we try to do is have the brain relax in terms and increase its ability to find that potential and emanate that, manifest that potential into the world. That's huge. Better cognitive performance, but also extremely better physical performance. So I don't see any questions today, but you can, if questions come up about this or anything else about brainwave optimization or how we can help you, then please contact us at Brain State Technologies. That's our phone number. You can give us a call, or it's Brain State Tech. It's info@brainstatetech.com, and we'll respond to you as quickly and with as much ability as we're able. Okay, besides this, a brief note on we've seen in clinical trial, and we've also seen here at Brain State Technologies for our clients and for the clients of our affiliates. And by the way, we train all of our affiliates. They don't carry the name Brain State Technologies because we license our technology. We are not a franchise. And they license that technology. We encourage them to use it per our best practices, and we have a continuing education process for them because we have new technology which comes out regularly. Now, in choosing a location, please know that we're training all of these people, and you're of course welcome to come to Scottsdale, but you're also freely encouraged to go to anywhere you are that's more comfortable for you. I'm just saying that if you live in the northern tier of the United States, especially on a day like today, you may want to come to Scottsdale. I'm just being snotty, but you know what I mean. Everybody that uses brainwave optimization is trained by Brain State, and if they aren't trained by Brain State, then there's something wrong with that provider or that technologist. So again, thank you very much for your time. I wish you the best in dealing with your college students. These kids are really, really important, and not only are they important, it's important for us as adults to remember how much more stress we're putting on them. So if you want to give them a huge gift, make them more enabled to deal with that stress and have them do brainwave optimization for their entire well-being. Thanks for today. Take care. Bye-bye.